quick chat, and you agreed to join here. So I just wanted to start maybe by giving you some time to talk about, why did you want to become a product leader? Why are you at smallPDF? What's the story there?
Yeah, let's start with this really simple question. I can also introduce myself real quick then if you want to.
Yes, please.
Let's do that, right? So my name is Leah. I'm 40 years old. I have COVID right now, and this is also maybe the reason why I might be sounding a little bit strange. So I'm really sorry for that. So depending on what I'm saying, I might just cough a little bit or have to sneeze in the middle. But anyways, yeah. So I'm a product manager at smallPDF, and I've been a product manager for like 10 years so far. And for me, getting into product management is probably like every other product manager different. There's people coming from data, there's people coming from research, there's people coming... Sorry?
Yeah, I was going to ask, where did you come from? Where was your origin?
Oh, exactly. So my original background was from UX research. So I was always fascinated with understanding what people sort of have as a motivation before they do it. Like when we started looking at people's behaviors, we were starting with Google Analytics. That was the best. Like, how many page views do you have? How many clicks do you have on something? Like, how long do people stay on a site? That does not really inform you on why they're doing it. And for me, it was quite important to understand the why, right? So like the motivation. And you need to go to the individual's level at some point to understand why people are doing what they're doing. And that's why I got into UX research. And I thought I'm pretty good at it. And then I noticed that I'm pretty frustrated by it because I couldn't really change anything about the things that I started to uncover. So as you start to understand people's motivations and their problems, you also want to ship products that actually address these problems. And this was mainly the entrance for me to become a product manager. Now, as I said, like everybody comes from a different background, right? Like you have data scientists, researchers, and so forth. And it's, we all start from having a really strong background in something, and in the rest we just suck. But as a product manager, you need to have this diverse skill set. So this was something that I really enjoyed because I love learning things. So to answer your question, how I got there, I was really frustrated with how I was led and how people actually created products. And that's why I ended up as a product manager in the end. It discouraged me a lot, to see how people were handling things. And to answer the second part of the question, like PM leadership. So like if you go to leadership positions in product management, if you start to manage a little bit more or bigger products and so forth. I initially had very bad managers in my life, in corporates mostly. And they usually have all the same things. Well, they are bad in the sense that they're very directive. They think they know more than you. They're the keepers of knowledge, right? So like they have the book of Tolkien and they know where the ring is and all that. And it's very, very frustrating. Like to work in an organization where people just they think because I say so, you have to do so. And in tech where I work, in product leadership, there are other ways to do these things. So I got very discouraged by these leaders and I wanted to do it better. And when I saw that you can do it better, that brought the two things together, so UX research, product management, and then product leadership in the end.
Yeah. So what would you say, product PMs or product leaders need to have a variety of skills or experience and talk to people that are so different from each other. What would you, as you say, maybe there's not one description of a product person, but what would you if you had to describe a product person's job in general, what would you say it is?
That's funny because 90% of the people that I know that have the title product manager probably don't fit this. There's this thing between project managers, product owners, and product managers. And in my mind, a product manager ships products. That much is clear, right? So you answer the why to the team. Like, why are we doing this, right? So you enable your team, you're trying to ship a product and so forth. But most people end up like project managers. They're just pushing deadlines. They try to organize everything. While that is a part of my job as well, there's far more than just like managing a backlog and keeping people happy. And that will be the short description. I think we're going to go a little bit later, more in depth. But like what a product manager does is they answer the why question, and you create alignment for your team.
Yeah.
If you cannot do that, then you're not a good product manager. And in my opinion, of course, right? So I'm going to get the hate mail now probably, but yeah, that's what it is.
That's fine. That's why we have spam boxes. So yeah, I see this distinction between product owner, project manager, and product manager a lot. There's this concept of project manager basically is, maybe there's top down, there's ideas of what to do, and the project manager just has to figure out when to do them, to get them done on time. So I like this definition of shipping products and also just solving business problems in a way that is good for the end user.
Historically, it came like the description product owner came from a Scrum role. Product owner is a very small part that I do as a product manager, right? Like you do manage the backlog with your team together and you decide what's coming first. But I think the main difference between PM and project manager is that the project manager, as you said, is told what to do. And the product manager knows where he can change things. And then he or she is actually trying to figure out with the team what is the best that we can actually do to solve this or influence this in a positive way. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard, I think, in some companies, the product manager is more like project manager, and maybe they don't even know it. The opinions of CEO or whoever are so strong, it's really hard to change that product mindset in the company. How would you, let's say I don't know if you are, I think you coach actually product managers. If one came to you and said, listen, this is our situation. My CEO or CFO or whoever, tells me what to do basically, and I just need to manage the ideas and make sure we deliver on time. What can a person do, a person like that? If they want to change the company, obviously they can leave and find another company. But
well, changing the company is always a tricky one because that's usually the job of the CPO or some, depends on like director, VP, whatever. It's quite difficult because it depends on what you expect from being a product manager. Like a product manager at one of the FANG companies, like the really big ones, is completely different than being a product manager in a startup. So you can have the same title, but your job is going to be just so much different. But I would say that specifically in tech, and we talk mostly about tech product management here, right?
Yeah.
You have to sort of figure out whether people claim to work collaborative or whether they work directive. And there's a very good way to sort of figure this out, in my opinion. And there's so let's say you're in an interview position or whatever, you try to ask yourself, am I a product manager? This is an actual question that someone asked me in my coaching. She asked me so here's what I do. And then after the description, she asked me am I actually a product manager, Leah? I'm like,
what am I?
Maybe. Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure. Am I a product manager? And I said, maybe not. But you can become one pretty quick. So there is something that you can exert in your own sort of field of influence, of course, right? So you can change how you manage your team. But if you cannot convince leadership, or you are in a product organization that is just not built for that sort of style of building products towards the customer's problems, then you just might have to change. But let's assume this is not the case. I think one of the key things that you need to have in your life, because this was also for me the case, is I had a couple of people in my life that led by a role model. I had to see it happen first before I knew what I want to have. You have hundreds, thousands of PMs who think that product management is just a stress job and it's not fun and it's like it's this and that because they've never seen it any different. So I think if you can just ask or like answer yourself the question, do I have ownership over a specific problem area or specific outcome? And I can decide how I'm going to solve that by myself with my team. Like, for instance, let's say all the Daniels in our customer base are unhappy and I need to fix this in the next 3 months and nobody tells me how, then you're probably in a collaborative environment because you can still decide on how you want to do things, right? So having ownership over certain things is very, very important.
Yeah. That will. I have another question later. I mean, if you have ownership, then we should have accountability. And so how do you know whether you're successful, and and that's maybe a second question. How do you measure a product manager? So marketing, you can say, hey, listen, we tie it to revenue, or we tie MQLs, or sales is deals closed. How is that in product management? How would you look at that?
So this is a little bit of a complicated question because it depends on in what organization you are. So let's say you are output based. And output based means you're being measured whether you deliver a specific feature. So let's say for you, the goal is in the next 3 months to build a house. If you do it, you're successful. If you don't, you're not successful. That's it, right? So this is like quite binary. So like either you are or you're not. On the other hand, if you have to sort of influence a metric or something that does not contain what you have to do to get there, like for instance, this family needs somewhere to live, build them something so they are happy afterwards through a survey or whatever, then you are outcome based, right? So like it doesn't matter how you do it, whether you do it with a house, with a tent, or with a canoe or whatever. It's up to you to find and have impact. Now that depends on whether you're using OKRs or goal settings, right? Are you in an organization that gives you a meaningful area where you can actually influence? Now, as you get bigger in a company, it gets harder and harder to directly influence the revenue. So let's say you and me, we had a company. It's very easy to figure out who has what impact on the revenue and so forth, right? Because, either we do a deal or we don't.
Right.
But if you have 10 teams, if you start to have 10 teams, then you need to start to divide your metrics into value capture. So value capture are things like revenue, trial started, that kind of thing. And the value capture is this base principle that we think if we create value for the user, and we can measure this. So for instance, if we measure how many documents you process every month, or how often you use a specific feature, we know that this connection is driving our revenue.
Yeah.
But your job is not to drive the revenue. Your job is to drive the actions that you do in a specific product, because we know that this has a direct combination with it. And the important thing to understand between this in this distinction is that if you measure it in this way, then you're not incentivized to manipulate it as easy. Because if it's about revenue, then you could say, well, I just make it harder for people to unsubscribe. And that's not what we want. We want to create long-term value for the users that has sustainability. And that only works if you create solutions for the problems that the users actually have. Right.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense now.
Would you say outcome-based versus output-based? Is there a better? I mean, you say it depends on the. I mean, maybe the size of the company or just in which company you are. Would you, if you could choose one, would you have a clear preference, or would you say it depends, or what should startups,
no question,
kind of founders think of?
Okay, now you complicated the question, because as soon as you bring startups into the picture, you have a special situation. So let's say you're a very, very small startup. most startups start with an output-based sort of model. They basically rally around a couple of developers, maybe they get some contractors in to get the most stuff done and so forth. And, we have a strong vision, right? A strong vision, giving it down and telling people what to develop is a directive form of management. I mean, not having a strong vision, but like telling people how to do things is a directive form of management.
Yeah.
But at some point, this becomes very ineffective if you start to have multiple product teams. Say you're growing and you have 4 and 5 people that have all their own different teams. Creating alignment is starting to get more and more difficult.
Yeah.
So now you have to maybe consider switching from this feature-based approach, which is very output-driven, to an outcome-driven approach where you say, okay, maybe we need a team that owns the conversions at the start of the funnel. So they make it easy for people to sign up to the product and they're not doing anything else. And then we want to have someone that takes care of product number 1, and that is their area. And we measure them on something very objective. So for instance, the NPS of the customers, like how happy are they? Or we want to increase the retention. That is a very common one as well. Like you want to make sure that people engage more with the product. If they engage more with the product, they retain longer. If they retain longer, they're going to unsubscribe less likely, and so forth.
Exactly.
Right? So to answer your question, it's outcome-based, definitely.
It's outcome-based,
For myself.
Quick question. I mean, I'm going for outcome-based as well. I think in our startup, we're kind of on the edge of becoming big enough that, alignment gets tricky. So we started with OKRs a few quarters ago. So on that lane towards outcome-based for sure. I have a question. You mentioned a very objective metric, which is NPS. I find it tricky with NPS. So we sell B2B enterprise. So we have users and they're different from the buyer, but we still ask our users, to fill out an NPS survey. Only, parts of the users fill it out. How seriously can you take that NPS score? One assumption I have is, super engaged users will, answer that survey, or, we have a survey with multiple questions. So it's either the ones who absolutely love it and want to spend more time on filling that out, or the ones that absolutely hate it and, have to put their anger somewhere. And then there's maybe some in the middle that just have nothing else to do. But how should one interpret an NPS score from a sub part of your users?
So let me ask you a question. What do you think the NPS tells you, or what the use of it is?
So I think it tells me whether people like or have enjoyed the experience enough, or not. So it's trying to take a qualitative thing and put it in a box.
Exactly, right? It's about the recommendation. Like, how likely would you recommend this product to someone else?
Yeah.
Now, your question is whether it's accurate enough to do anything about it. But my question is like, if your NPS is 50 versus 30 or 20, do you behave different because of this particular rating? No, you don't.
So
the important thing about the NPS is if it changes. Right? It is a lagging indicator. If something is wrong with your product, and therefore your churn will increase, like people unsubscribing from your product in the future. And NPS is actually not very useful if you have a product. So let's take my car, right? I'm driving a Tesla Model 3. And
good for you.
If you would look at my NPS, sorry?
It's good for you. I like that car. I would love to drive that
exactly.
car.
No, it's good. It's good for me. Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's good for me. No, but like, if you would ask me for my NPS rating for the car, I would give you a 10. It's great. A 9 or a 10. It's a great car. But what it doesn't tell you is, whether I hate certain things about it, right? Like it does not really give you a detailed view. It just tells you like the overall experience, is it fine or not? If the overall experience is bad, and I'm giving you a 6, a 5, a 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever, then we're having a problem. That's a big problem. Yeah. That's a huge problem. It still doesn't tell you what the problem is, but that's a huge problem. So the NPS is not good to react and inform your product management, right? But it tells you very much whether something is wrong or whether you have actually increased the quality of your overall product. And a much more useful measure in that sense would be the CES, for instance. So this would be like you measure per feature. So like, how easy was this for you? Do you like the wind wipers in your Tesla? No, I don't. Then you get much more diverse ratings. So that's the problem with the NPS. Is it accurate? Depends. It depends on how often did you use something. But people have a tendency to tell you if they hate something. So if you see a downtrend, do expect that your churn will go up as well. No.
Yeah. This is good to hear. This is something we just recently did, looking at the NPS over time, and that really helped, seeing a trend. And I think that's much more valuable than, we have an NPS of 46. Good. So now what are we going to do about it? So you said you've been in product for 10 years. So there's been, I imagine you didn't enter this role at the stage where you are. So there's some kind of evolution from PM, senior PM. I don't know. Depends on the company, probably. How do you think? How do the responsibilities change from, let's say, from PM to senior PM to lead?
Yeah. So the way that the responsibilities change is quite peculiar for product management because. At least that's the way how I experience it, right? So like you start as a junior PM or as an associate, right? So like the first 3 levels are always sort of more of the same, but in more senior positions, right? At some point. So you have junior PM, then you become an associate, then you become a senior. If you're a very senior person in a different job, like a very senior data analyst, then you might be already starting at as a senior PM, right? Like, so that could be.
Got it.
That could perfectly be. But then an interesting thing happens. So if you go to product leadership, like group PM, product lead, director, VP, CPO, that kind of thing, it's not more of the same. You cannot use more of the same skills that you had. Now you have to be much more diverse. Now you have to shift from being a product manager that takes care of something very specific to taking more care about the company. Like, let me give you an example. So in bigger companies, or like, it depends on what you think about bigger companies, but if you go from senior usually to a leadership role, like group PM, director, and so forth, you have to take into account whether what someone else built has a net benefit for the company. Because it could be that you're building a feature that the users love. It converts well. It's great. It's a great thing. But overall, it cannibalizes so much from the rest of the product that it is not worth it. Yeah. So a good example is when you start with a new product, you have a startup, right? At the start, everything is simple. The entire interface is simple, whatever, but then you attach more and more products to it. At what point do you decide it's too much? It takes too much attention away from the other features. You might not be able to A/B test everything in a quantitative way that gives you an absolute sort of answer to this. And that's one way in how it changes, right? And then also depending on the companies, you are more, you get responsibility to directly manage other PMs. And that usually only happens after being a senior PM. And then you have to sort of decide, am I going more into a managerial role, which is definitely something that I'm always pushing for, or into an individual contributor role. And the individual contributors, like staying on that sort of level, they keep building products, but they do it better and better and better and better. Whereas the leaders, they make sure that the contributors can do a good job, right? So they also help with hiring. They may be taking care of the strategy from top down a little bit more. But yeah, that's more or less it, right? Like, so you step out of your individual product and then you get more into a much more diverse field in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, leading product managers, coaching them, I guess seeing, career progression, supporting them in that. So I see this, if I understood it correctly, senior PM to lead, that's a bit the change there. What are all the other, director, VP, CPO, what would you say is the difference there?
So it depends on the definition, unfortunately, and that one is different for every company that I have ever worked in. It's a lot of signaling as well, to be honest, because we all are senior PMs at some point. You're always staying sort of the senior PM. But the most common definition that I usually think makes a lot of sense. There are certain job titles where we have a common understanding on what they sort of do. So the first sort of agreed on leadership role that is very common is a group product manager. And a group product manager usually manages 2 to 4 other PMs, depending on the size. And they usually make sure that, these PMs do the right things together, that they're aligned and that everything sort of works. So they're still operationally a little bit involved. So let's say if you want to have a split, then you could say 50% management, 50% operational involvement.
Got it.
This is a really good job to have to figure out whether you want to continue on the managerial path or whether you want to stay more operationally involved. Because contrary to some beliefs, I don't think it's always good to manage more and more people. That's not how it works for product management. Maybe you still want to create products because that's what you fell in love with. And then you probably should go the individual contributor role and you just build kick-ass products with your teams. But that doesn't mean that you are less paid or you get less equity or whatever than a director, for instance. So I hope that makes sense. So the first role there is really group product manager. But let's say you decide you go up a level. Then you have another one, which is the product director.
Yeah.
This is a manager of managers in the sense that they are managing group product managers, for instance, PM leads, whatever. And from there, it gets a little bit fuzzy, specifically if you have you want to have a VP product, which would be the next level. So like a vice president of the product, head of product, that kind of thing. Usually in a tandem with a CTO. So they work very closely together, trying to do things. And then you have the executive position, which would be the CPO, which basically are responsible for the entire product organization. But, between the theory and the practice, I've seen companies where the highest product manager was a director. And you have companies that have only a CPO and like one product manager below, right? So
it really depends.
It differs a lot. And you will struggle with finding a definition that makes sense all around, I guess. But the biggest distinction is that you will not get into product leadership if you haven't been a good senior product manager, ideally. You need to have a really good foundation as a senior before you can go there. And that is interesting because that's not the case in every job, right? Yeah. Because you can become a manager without being good at what the people are actually doing below you sometimes. But with product management, and this is also why I love it so much, you have usually people above you who know better. So they become really good mentors for you as well. So ideally your CPO should know better than you in most areas at least. Yeah.
It's interesting that it's not like that in other areas. I feel like ideally that is the case, that your boss knows better, at least in some areas. hopefully in most.
Yeah.
Could you?
I can cook better than my boss, I think. I hope he doesn't watch this then.
Don't worry, I will be sharing this all over the internet afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
No, but I was wondering, if you look at an organization and you can see what is the highest product role, can you take from that the importance or the power that product has in the organization? Maybe that
No.
outcome based, top down based. No
chance.
You wouldn't do that.
No chance. So I've been speaking with people who have companies that have the size of two, and then one of them calls himself CEO and the other one is the CPO, but there's no one else in the company. This doesn't tell you anything, right? It's nice to put it on LinkedIn, but as soon as you do some research, you kind of ask yourself, okay, I mean, what kind of product organization are you leading? No, it absolutely doesn't. And you need to do your research, right? Like in the sense of like try to figure out how many people are in a company. How do they lead? Is it a tech company that is product led, or is it sales led, right? So like, does the product guide sort of what you're building, or is it more like a sales driven approach to pay attention to what the customers really specifically need in a very specific segment, and you have these long development cycles? For me, the ideal environment is in tech and product led, so I know what to look out for. But you cannot ask like this, right? So you cannot go into an interview and be like, "Hey, so guys, are you product led?" Because those who are, they know, so they might be saying yes, and those who are not, they also say yes, because they always like, "Yeah, our product is really important." But it's a big hype. Like,
Exactly.
Yeah, of course.
This was a perfect segue into my next set of questions. So product led, product led growth, the big hype at the moment. What's your take on product led growth? Is it a hype? Is it?
It's a deserved hype, I think. Because I mean, from my personal perspective, it's really what saved me to have passion for product. Like, I'm someone that strives in an environment where you have clearly defined responsibilities that you can really exert and have a lot of freedom on how you actually sort of take care of your garden, right? But the thing that I like the most about it is that you really, in the process of how we are doing things, you do take care of people as well. Like whether it's my designers or whether it's my engineers or the UX researcher or the data scientist, it doesn't really matter. Because I'm facilitating everyone and I'm trying to collaborate with everyone, they get a lot of insights in what we are doing, right? So I'm not telling them what to build. I'm trying to tell them, guys, these are the problems, right? So I'm trying to make the problems visible from the customers. And this is a very humanistic approach to management, I feel, because you feel taken serious. It is very important to me that you understand why we're doing things so you can also learn from it. It's not that you're creating a button somewhere. You're creating a part of a solution that creates a frustration on the other end of the customer, and here's why we're doing it. And if you explain it this way, then people can also challenge it much better. And basically, product-led growth means that you have to expose yourself as a product manager to the opinions of your team. And that might sound like a simple thing, but you will be challenged a lot because we're trying to find the best solution. And it's not my solution, it's the solution from the team. So in that sense, I'm absolutely for it in terms of the management style, but I also believe that this product-led growth, this value that you create for the user, always transform into long-term business value in the end. And there's just no way around it, right? If you do not make money, then you're not solving a problem. Exactly. And I think this is a really cool sort of connection between this sort of capitalistic approach, if you want to call it this way, and a really humanistic sort of perspective on things, that if you do not solve a problem for the user, nobody will buy it. And that's to answer your question, yes, absolutely. It's not a hype. Well, maybe it is, but it's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it'll go away. It'll probably stay maybe on social media. We'll just hear another hype, but I think product-led growth is. I really like the whole, show value first approach, rather than give me your email address before I give you anything. So I really enjoy that philosophy. Are there any success stories of product-led growth, initiatives at smallPDF?
Hopefully, yes. So, I mean basically everything that we do is going in that. There must be, yes. So, we're quite a successful business at the moment. This is fair to say. We have 50 million active users every month. So that's a big number, and that number would not stay, the same if we wouldn't really solve specific problems. But let's say for the bigger things, usually the stuff that I do also with my team is really centered around consolidating all these tools that we created over the last 5 years into these various specific use cases, right? So for instance, if you come to Google and you say, I want to compress a PDF, then we had a tool for you that was very simple. You upload a file, it gets compressed, you get the output, boom, you're done, go, you're out, right? But it turned out that if you're looking at the users, you have a very specific segment of those that have more complex needs. It's pretty obvious, right? Like, it sounds like I'm giving you a revelation here, but it's pretty obvious. People don't just want to compress a PDF. They may also want to edit it first. They want to annotate it. They want to do certain things before that. But if you give them now all these simple tools to do that, they have to jump from one tool to another, and then another, and then another. And suddenly the simple tools become quite cumbersome because you have to jump always between all of these simple tools. So one of the things that we started to do, excuse me, about a year ago was to consolidate all of these tools into one powerful tool.
Got it.
And this sounds easy, but one of the main challenges that we had is that if you look at the market, and for instance, if you take a very prominent competitor like Adobe or any of the other PDF softwares that are out there, we always had the advantage of being simple in that you get to your value very fast. It does not require a PhD to understand the product. You don't have to jump through 20 hoops to just log in because of Adobe and they want to download the Creative Cloud and so forth. Hi, Adobe, if you're watching this.
Hello.
So we had to retain this ease of use to learn the tool in the current one that we're trying to build. And it looks good so far, right? So like we're trying to consolidate more and more and more. And this has been really a focal point for us because this is a big change in how we are actually selling the product to the customers as well. And this is in the end a result of a lot of people working together, a lot of research that really confounded, yes, we need this. And it also pays a little bit of tribute to the markets are changing constantly. If you think about what your system, I'm not sure whether you use a Mac, for instance, right? But like, if you think about what your Mac was able to do 6 to 7 years ago, out of the box, without installing any software, it could do way less than it can do now. And so in a sense, Windows and Mac just out of the box is taking more and more from our product away, or our market, if you want to call it that. Yeah.
True. Yeah. Oh, so you're competing with Apple. That's always nice. I experienced this, or I experienced feedback from our users as well. First hints at a kind of the disjointed experience. I need to jump from this to there, and so I feel like that's maybe something that you were feeling, and respect for kind of bring all those products together. If you go to your website, there's a lot of PDF tools. So that must have been and still is a challenge.
It is, yeah. Because you don't want to alienate your core group, right, of people. This is the biggest problem that you can do.
Yeah. So you said, I imagine this takes a lot of communication with other stakeholders in the company. Marketing, sales, probably everyone. Who would you consider your main stakeholders, the most important ones? And do you think it changes from company to company? or are they kind of look out for these three always as a product?
So I would say it depends on the product organization again, like how different they are, in the sense that, let's take the one that I'm in, right? So we have a collaborative environment where I have my garden and my boss is not like telling me what to do, but what he does is he challenges me like a coach. That's the idea, right? So like it's a very challenging sort of environment in that sense. And it's not so much who is the most important stakeholder. I think because that never changes, right? Like it's always your team, it's always your management or whatever. But it's more like the mode of how you interact with them. If I build up trust with my leaders that I can do certain things, then they will check in less with me, and it's more to me about getting feedback from them actively, right? Like you're building up trust, and that's in the end how you sort of earn it. Same sort of with the team, but I think the most important stakeholder that you really have in an organization like this is kind of the customer. Because if you do not know what the problems they have are, everything else that you do is sort of failing. And this is quite interesting because it gets forgotten so much. It's like, yeah, it's obvious. Yeah, of course. But then you ask, like, so do you do a lot of interviews every week with the customers? Yeah, we kind of do. Yeah, we kind of do. No. Do you do the interviews with the customers? You never learn out. You're never done with all of this. So I know it's a little bit of a cop-out, but like in terms of stakeholders, it is the customers, it's like in every company, right? But in the end, I think the responsibility for what you are doing is falling more to the team in an organization that we have, rather than on just like one person, because we're very collaborative, right? Like we're trying to agree on the best solutions before we actually go forward.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned this, the main stakeholder is the customer. I just had a friend today ask, how do you guys prioritize? Sales wants something, and then customer success wants something, and I asked a full question, long text on WhatsApp, and it was also my response was, well, the roadmap should be defined by customer problems and not necessarily by what sales was at once and customer success wants. Obviously, you need to talk to those, and if they have problems, fix them or integrate them, but that was a very interesting question. How do you prioritize? And again, putting the customer first and solving problems for them, ideally.
I mean, there is an old sort of wise words that people usually sort of distribute, and that is, what you do not measure, you cannot improve. So if you go again with the car in the end, if you do not sort of try to figure out what the problem with your car is, whether it performs well, right? So like you can also apply this to the customer. If you do not know whether the customer is actually happy with you, or whether it performs well or it doesn't, or does it really solve the problem that you're addressing, there's no way that you can improve it, right? And the more you measure, the more that you measure smart, right? It doesn't matter, like, just don't go around and just measure 1,000 things. Like, yes, exactly. These mountains are easily created, and they're not always helpful. But the more you actually get a good sight, and data can also be these customer problems, and then you will be more confident that what you're doing is not only good, but also one of the best things that you can do at this point in time. Because that's what prioritization is about. Trying to figure out which one of the things that we can do has the biggest leverage. Because in the end, product management is a different form of risk management. We're not scientists. We're not proving anything in the world. But we manage the risk in the littlest possible amount of time before we hand it over to the product team, and then they start to actually building something, and then they go with it.
Yeah.
Just talking to 10 customers and see whether 4 of them have the problem that we assume they have can really open your eyes. You might be convinced that, this is amazing, we have to build this product, whatever. Find me first a person who actually has this problem, then we talk, right?
Yeah.
This is what I mean. So it's risk management. You can do a lot more before you throw someone into a product.
Yeah. How do you go then? Let's say you have 4 people that said they have this problem. 6 said they don't have this problem. So we have in our company, we have a community. So we teach people some innovation methodologies. And so questions come up, while applying it in their jobs. And they say, well, I have these 4 people telling me, they have this problem. How do I go to my management and tell them and convince them that we should further investigate? Because what they hear is, seriously, you have 4 people, we're $1 billion company. You have 4 people that have a problem. So how do you go from that first indication to, I guess my take would be, okay, find more data. This is kind of the flagpole. Oh, there's something in that direction. And then you use that to say, can I take more time to investigate this further? And then you go maybe broader, or what would your take be?
So can you give me an example where you heard about this, like the 4 people? Was it in a Discord channel or emails or from sales or?
So that was one of our learners that's in, I think, some internal job, people experience for a large corporate. And so he's looking at the office experience for the employees. And so there was, I don't know, 4 people said, I don't know what it was, the coffee sucks. I don't know. And so he was like, should I take this up with management, or should I say it's just for people? Or, his job is to improve the experience. So for him, it's very important.
Sure. Okay. Okay, so 2 problems, right? So like if you have a big set of customers who are starting to complain about things, you will see some commonalities, of course, right? So like, as you said, you'll notice this particular problem. It could be that certain people are just louder than others. That's the first thing, right? That's always a problem that you have. The second thing is if you look at the big data set of things and you look for something very specific, you will find these 4 people. The question is not whether 4 people have this problem. So you're not going to management and say, hey, I found 4 people who have this problem. What you have to do is the very first step is you go to 10 people. So you have your indication, right? The coffee sucks. You go to 10 people in the company, and then you have to decide whether you only want to ask the coffee drinkers or whatever. And then you ask them very specifically, how much do you like this coffee? That is a different onset of data gathering than just like, I found 4 people who hate the coffee. I cannot do anything with this because it does not inform me initially what the ratio is of people who actually hate the coffee. That's the first question that you have to answer. So if you ask the coffee drinkers, you will get a specific distribution, like, okay, 20% hate it, 40% don't, whatever. And then you might have to also ask yourself, how many of the people in the building are actually coffee drinkers versus the ones that are not, and how many are not because the coffee sucks. So it gets more and more complicated, right? So if you ask customers about specific problems, you get a very narrow set, and you should never forget that you're asking those who actually bought it.
Yeah.
And the picture might be completely different from those who are just potential users or like potential customers. So I just made your question a little bit more complicated, but I would say the first indication is there might be a problem. You can verify this by asking 10 people, maybe 20. Then you can do a survey in the intranet, whatever. Like, okay, so out of 200 people, so many have said something like this. And then you can interpolate the number to the entire building or employees that you have. And then the second question that the product leader has to you is that, is this really the best use of your time? Do you have nothing else that has bigger leverage? If it is your job to keep people happy and you say, okay, this affects 15% of the people. Okay, might be worth it.
Yeah.
Let's try on one floor. Let's put a better coffee up there. And the prototype could be you going to Starbucks, getting the coffee and bringing it up there and then have them re-rated. That could be the MVP there, right?
Exactly.
So data gathering is a tricky one, right?
Yeah. But super important how you do it, because you can really skew the you can really skew the message if you gather the wrong data or
If you want to find the problem, you will find it. Absolutely.
Exactly.
You can manipulate your own data as much as you want, but putting it in a big context is much more important than you being convinced like, oh my God, this is such a big problem. So that is also a skill that a product manager needs to have, and the leader keeps it in sort of like, does this make sense in the bigger picture?
Yeah. I want to talk about a topic that you mentioned in our first call that you're going to hate me for this. You really like this topic. It's called SAFe.
What did I do?
Do you know SAFe? Have you heard of SAFe?
No. No, never. I think,
never.
Okay,
yeah.
So, okay, so for the audience maybe, so as your company grows, you will have more and more dependencies, and you might need to have specific frameworks that sort of align the teams so the sprints are sort of in sync and all that. And we kind of said goodbye to waterfall models a couple of years ago already, right? So like we don't like to work in waterfall models where you plan everything at the start and then it goes sort of through. So there we started to develop agile work methods. And an agile work method means you develop fast, you ship fast, and then you get the feedback from the customers fast and so forth, so in the ideal world. The people that sort of invented SAFe kind of did the miracle of putting an agile framework into a waterfall process. And I'm not a big fan of it, right? Like the implementations that I saw were absolutely abysmal. Now, that doesn't mean that SAFe is universally bad, but I think oftentimes in companies that have a bigger size, it's the wrong answer to the right sort of problem. If you think about how teams have to communicate with each other, and let's say you have a product-led organization where, the teams are collaborative, everybody is like sort of, getting along with each other, everything is rosy and all that. But you have dependencies. You have two choices, right? You can either manage these dependencies in terms of, SAFe, like if Leah is done with this, then Daniel can do that, and then this stuff is going to happen up here. So you have these release trains, right? So where you do a lot of alignment between the teams. Or you really put in some effort to reduce these dependencies. And the base principle is that that's also what we are trying to do, is we're trying to make the teams independent. We're not trying to manage the dependencies. You will never get rid of them completely. But we're not trying to manage dependencies. We're trying to cut them off, right? Like independent teams are so much stronger than teams that just sort of try to manage all the spaghetti stuff that is running around. And that is another challenge to the product organization. If you create teams that constantly are dependent on each other, then you have a problem. Now, having said that, certain teams are always dependent on other teams. Like you have stream-aligned teams, like for instance, I don't know, my team, for instance, is working on the core product, but then you have some platform teams who are responsible for the infrastructure. We will always be dependent on those. I don't know if a new authentication is coming or whatever, but there is a huge range of things that we can do ourselves before we sort of have to wait for what the other guys are doing. And that's the key of it, right? So no, I'm not a fan of SAFe, but I do acknowledge that sometimes you do need some frameworks that sort of scale the Scrum approach.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of autonomous teams or independent teams, what does that team look like in terms of, what roles, how many team members, can you have an independent team of 20, or how should a company think about that as it grows? I read from the I read from the I think ex-head of product from HubSpot, who now leads Drift, right? He has this whole book about how he did it at HubSpot with small teams. So that's kind of where I first heard about it. I think it's teams of 4, three engineers, maybe I think a designer, and then a product marketing manager. What's your take on that?
First of all, I'm a huge fan of HubSpot. So everybody from my company who's watching this is probably now laughing. It's a fantastic company. Their product that they have and the way that they sort of expanded on the vertical and horizontal markets is absolutely insane. It's really, really good, right? So having said that, yes, I don't agree that the ideal size of a team is 4. It's a bit too generalistic. Because we also need to talk about what kind of teams that we're talking about. So if we talk about product teams, in the classical sense where you have a product manager, you usually have a designer, and then you usually have also an engineer. That would be the minimum size that you need to have before you can do anything, right? It really depends on what you want to do. But let's say we could agree on a maximum size of something. I would say it gets cozy when you reach the 9 people, 10 people sort of mark, depending on how you're doing it. But let's say you build a really complex product, and complex in the terms of technology, you might need front-end and back-end engineers. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, if you have 2 or 3 engineers, you also need a tech lead who manages those. So usually the setups that we have, we call them pods, not teams, but like it's a pod. It's almost like a startup in a startup. Is we have one product manager, we have a designer. If it's a product that has a design facing outwards to the customer, we have a pod lead who is managing the engineers themselves. And then you have the engineers, so they could be a mixture between front end and back end. And then you can have a really dynamic setup. Like sometimes you have a UX researcher or a data scientist or both. And it really depends on what the goal is of the team and what the needs are. So we are relatively data heavy in the teams, or like in the team that I have. And so we have a high need for qualitative research on this particular stuff. So we have a UX researcher in the team, at the moment, even 2 designers, which is, it's very individualistic. But I would say you're definitely not hamstringed with a small team. I was quite successful with small teams. No question. Yeah. Because it's easier to create alignment as well.
Yeah. And then would you have, at some point you have quality assurance, I suspect, right? Quality assurance engineer or what I see you have an opinion on quality assurance. Is that a centralized thing or do you do that?
No. So okay. So this is a difficult question because again, it depends on the product that you have. So I would say that depending on where you are. So let's say you are working in healthcare or any regulated industry that has to deal with tech where other people depend on. There are different needs that you just cannot compromise on. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing, right? And whether you are insourcing quality assurance, like to have a tester, like before everything goes out or not, is really personal preference. Personally, I like to insource everything. But rather than having a dedicated tester, I would like the engineers to do some of the quality testing, the designers, and also the product manager, because it exposes you again to the product. But if you're in a highly regulated industry, like medicine, HIPAA, and so forth, there's no way around, I think, that you need to have some final sort of place that does not let anything go through. So quality assurance can be really hard to deal with, I think. Mm-hmm. But in the end, I think it's necessary, depending on like what kind of product you have, of course. Yeah. Yeah,
definitely. How? Yeah. So let's look at. I have a bigger topic that's leading product. Your product lead at smallPDF. How is it for you to be more and more distanced to the users and the product? Are you more distanced? I imagine from when you were a researcher.
For myself, not. No.
Really close.
Yeah. So I think there's two things happening, right? So like also if you're in product leadership in that sense. So let's say you're a group PM or like you start to become a, I don't know, product lead or director, whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. I don't think that you should ever disconnect yourself from the customers completely. Mm-hmm. It's just the level of detail that you're going into, right? Like it can make sense for me when I'm working with my team to really go into the nitty-gritty about specific details. And for me right now, I'm managing directly one team with 12 people in it. So this is, like the size by itself is more than what I said is ideal before, right? But the size by itself is already disconnecting you from something because your time is limited and you can sort of choose on what you're going to do. Are you going to spend less time on the backlog? Are you going to spend less time in the one-to-ones with the engineers, with the designers and so forth? Or are you going to reduce the customer interviews and your exposure to the customer problems? In the end, I think you should never disconnect yourself from the customers because that is kind of your main job. And it's getting harder, of course, if you go to really high leadership positions in really big companies. You might be not doing the interviews yourself, of course, but I think you really should stay connected in some way to or another, like either through research or like, to reviews or like synthesis on like really good interviews and stuff, because that's never going to change.
Yeah. So you are managing, or you're in a team with 12 people. How do those, how many one-to-ones do you have per week?
11. So, I mean, no, more actually, because I have also some other stakeholders. So I think one-on-ones are very important in the sense that they're the one spot where people can really give you feedback and you can also show them that their time is also important to you. And I have a one-to-one with everyone in the team. Now, as you approach that amount of people, you sort of have to make compromises. So they have gone from 1 hour to 45 minutes and then to 30 minutes. And then from, now they're on a weekly basis. So 11 meetings with just like these one-to-ones. And then you have one-to-ones with some other leaders in the company, maybe some alignment meetings with other leaders and stuff. And I mean, in average, actually, I can check right now, but I think in average, I have about 25 hours in meetings every week, whereas the one-to-ones are the bulk of that. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But that's totally okay. I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, you have to be.
I really love that.
I think. Yeah, I love talking to all the different parts of our team. I think you have to like that.
Yeah.
Because so I just now see my future. Yeah. If I keep going on that route, 25 hours, I can expect 25 hours.
You better enjoy talking to people. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's part of the
really
job.
enjoy. I enjoy talking to the different teams and the different perspectives, and it's really, really cool. How do you make sure that you keep learning? I guess the job itself, keeps you on your toes. But how do you make sure you keep getting better or improving in what you do? Because I'm. Do you have a coach? You said you have a.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, absolutely. So that will never change. Like I will always find someone who tells me what I'm bad at. I constantly nag people who I think are competent in a very specific area to give me feedback on what I could do better in what I do. And I think that is very, very important in the sense that if you're ever satisfied with what you do, and I think almost everybody can tell, like, I'm not so good at this particular part, you really should not be hesitant to get good feedback from someone. Now, if you're doing it in the same company, that can be quite annoying because you don't want to sort of admit that you're having a weakness or whatever, or I don't know, people are particular about this kind of stuff sometimes. And the more you go into a leadership position, you don't want to admit that you're bad at something or whatever. Like some people have a problem with that. I personally don't think that I do, because I like being vulnerable as well, because it also shows people that, look, it's okay not to be perfect in your job, because we don't expect that from anyone.
Definitely.
And you can only get better if, as I said, like what you do not measure, you cannot improve. So you need to hear first from someone that, well, that was not so good. And yes, I do have a coach. And I expect from them very hard challenges as well. Like, okay, that was not good. That was absolutely sub-average or whatever it is. And you have to keep the beginner's mindset. You never assume that you're the best at anything. Never stop. And you can be passionate about the most boring stuff. But I would say that the thing that always works for me, sort of, is that if you have an actual problem coming up in your business life, let's say you have a product, right? That you have a very specific problem. And then you learn a new framework or a new philosophy about something. That is the best way to grow, because it really sticks as you can apply it, and then you're trying to get better at it and so forth. So getting feedback first, what's wrong, is important. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you have a trick of how you get people to give you feedback? So I'm known in my team as the feedback guy, because I kept asking people for feedback. But it turns out it can be difficult for people to come up with feedback. A lot of things we hear in the team is, well, I'm not an expert at what you do or what someone else does, so how can I give feedback? Other reasons. What is it that you do to actually get useful responses?
There is a very, very good book on the topic, and I'm going to summarize it real quick. It's called Radical Candor by Kim Scott. The base principle is that it is your job to establish an open culture of feedback in the way that you just said it, like give me feedback, whatever. And there's a couple of things that you can do with this. So for some people, it comes natural to be criticized and, to also give criticism because, it's just what they do, right? But let's say you do not have either senior people or culturally, it can also be sometimes a little bit more difficult, that they just do not want to criticize you, or they just keep saying oh no, everything was perfect. I can point in every presentation that I have, in every podcast that I do, in everything I do, 20 things that are annoying about me, like the way that I move my hands or whatever. And you do not need to be a domain expert to point that out.
Exactly.
So I think what's important is that you clarify expectations beforehand. So let's say you have a presentation, 30 minutes about a very specific product or topic or something that you want to talk about. You can tell your team, guys, we're going to have a get-together afterwards, and I would love for you to summarize my talk back to me with 2 points that are good and 2 things that you were thinking that could need some improvement.
Yeah.
But I think it's important that you do this, that they can do this in their own time.
Yeah.
And this is very, very tricky sometimes, but it's doable. If people know in their one-to-ones that the first question that you ask them, I do this more or less successful, what can I do better? And I want you to be prepared for this question beforehand. So it's not like, hey, Daniel, what can I do better? Right? It's more like, so Daniel, what did you think about what I can do better? Right?
Yeah.
So then they need to think about it. And I want to hear something, whether it's about how I move my hands or I don't know, whether the audio was too loud or I couldn't follow some of your slides or whatever. Whatever it is, you will always find something. And that gives you also the confidence that it is okay to be criticized back. Yeah. It is only okay for me to criticize one of my team members if they criticize me first, right? So I can give an example, hey, it is actually okay to be this open about it. And I think a very important bit that I picked up also from that book is that whatever your criticism or feedback is towards people, it should be unique and not applicable to the next person that is standing next to it. And what I mean with that is that if I say, hey, Daniel, this was a really good podcast, that is useful. It's useless feedback, right? I have to be very specific about something that sort of proves I paid attention and I engaged with the content that was presented. And this also applies to positive feedback. Oh, you did a great job last week. No. Hey, I really liked how you drove these initiatives. And in turn, you actually kept me from having to go into a couple of meetings because of this. This was awesome. Thank you very much. That's better feedback. It's not great, but it's better. Yeah.
I read the book, I think last year, and I thought it was amazing. I really liked it and tried to implement that in my one-to-ones. I told people, okay, next week I want to hear one criticism of what I do this week. Kind of the goal was really to get people to criticize me first, instead of starting to dish out critical feedback myself. I think that's a great way, and I'll try to also be more specific on my end with my team. They're probably laughing now. I mean, they laughed. Your team laughed for HubSpot, and
they are. Why would they laugh at you?
No, they don't laugh at me. They laugh. I think they just think it's funny, the image I have built about being the feedback guy. So it's kind of a joke, okay. but I'm getting them there. So what's another topic? I'm the, I would say, first or second employee at our startup. We're 13 people. And so I lead the product team, but I don't only do that. So there's a lot of other topics that are on my plate. And so what I've really moved towards is, these autonomous teams. I don't want to be the project manager that has to prepare all the work packages with perfect specs, so that the engineers can just go task by task. So I'm really going into the direction of making the team autonomous and making sure they don't need me for a lot of stuff. Obviously, I'm still part of the team, but what is your take on the notion of making yourself replaceable as a team member, so that the team can work independently, even though you might not be there for a week or two or a month, versus the notion of, hey, I'm irreplaceable, I'm so valuable. If you take me out of the equation, it's going to be a problem. What I think most, or not most, but a lot of people might aspire to.
I think it's one of those things that would probably prop up on one of those pictures where you have a beach in the background, right? And then you have this writing on top, like, make yourself replaceable. This is your goal as a PM. Well, the reality of it is that's never going to happen. But I think it's good to aspire to something like that, in a sense. However, I think it sounds nice, right? And in principle, it's okay. So your team can also run without you if you're missing for a particular amount of time. But if you weren't needed, then your job would also not be needed. And I think one of the reasons for this is that misalignment does creep back in if you do not constantly reconstruct it. More senior teams are better at this. But if you think about it, like if you become like 100 employee company, now you suddenly have 7, 8 product teams, maybe more. Now you need to have alignment between the teams, and maybe between the teams and management and other teams in other subsidiaries and so forth. So making yourself replaceable, it's a nice notion. I think it's good that you do not need to be there for everything. So you should not be a micromanager. I definitely agree on this one. But misalignment always comes back, I think. And I think what's more important to take away from this one is that you should never, ever, ever be a keeper of secrets. If the things cannot run if you had an accident or you become ill or I don't know, God forbid what, you're doing something wrong. If we're collaborative and we share everything, it should not be that you're the only one with the key to something. And it just doesn't work this way. You're not making yourself more valuable by just not sharing certain things. Like, ooh, I read a book, but I'm not telling anyone about it, right? Like, it's like, oh, come on, whatever, right?
That doesn't sound like someone I would like to work with. So in terms of systems, so with systems.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think we have a little lag there.
No, it's fine.
With this tool.
Yeah, I know, it's fine. Go ahead.
So I was thinking, I was wondering what types of, I call them systems, but it's probably just, I don't know what other word to use, but systems that, you've implemented that have made your team better, types of meetings or types of processes or documents, or just maybe that have become part of that product team culture. Is there something that, you see in your team that works really well?
Unfortunately, I cannot drop now like one revolutionary meeting that everybody is going to copy afterwards.
Oh, damn it.
But I think that I do think that at some point as you grow, having different meetings that serve specific uses start to prop up. For instance, at some point as your company grows, you will have a problem with your idea backlog. Either you have too many ideas, or you have no ideas, or there's just like a collection of Post-its and nobody knows exactly who has researched what, and alignment goes missing, right? And this is something that we deal with every day, right? So like, oh, there's not alignment between this and that, or like this designer does this research and then this UX researcher does sort of the same and so forth. So usually it's about creating alignment. And one meeting that I actually really enjoy, and I keep going on about this, so my team will probably hear about this again, is that if you have a lot of teams, you just make a monthly sort of sync where you throw both teams together in a room without an agenda. And the only thing that you talk about is what you're doing. So, like we're working on this and that particular feature or whatever. And we have a team page on Notion where we sort of list every week what we're doing and everything. And theoretically, everybody's informed. But there is a difference if you connect engineers with other engineers and you say, look, we're going to do this particular thing, and you can talk to them. Because suddenly there's questions coming up. Oh, I had no idea that you're doing. Why are you doing this? How are you solving that particular thing?
Yeah.
So this is maybe one of the revolutionary meetings where you have not an agenda and everybody comes like, yeah, but you have to organize it. You have to you should be talking about a topic or no. Sit them all on a table and say, okay, guys, let's just start talking. Here's what we do.
Throw them in a pot.
Was any of this interesting? Yeah, just throw them in a pot. And that's definitely something. We have ideation meetings where we talk about which ideas we want to spend a little bit more time on to move them forward. So we have like a process where we start to, you have an idea with just a name, then you put a description on it. And then if you move it forward, then you put also some estimations on it. Mm-hmm. Like impact, how many people does it affect? Does it have a likelihood of surviving and so forth? So you move the stuff through the process, but all of this is very individual. And I think the sort of answer to your question is again that no, I don't have anything specific that is super surprising. But it should be always in tune with what you have as a specific problem. Because that's individual anyways. No book in the world will tell you, or like there's maybe some books that do, but like they're useless anyways. What kind of meeting structure you should have as a product manager. The one thing that I think you can never take away is the one-to-ones. I'm going to die on that hill. Because even if you're not the direct manager of all the people in your team, please talk to them, right? Like, I mean, it's kind of important.
Yeah. So you have one-to-ones with the entire team. You said 11 people, right? The engineers, the designer,
Everyone.
How is it?
Yes. Everybody gets a load of Leah.
How is that received by, engineers that prefer to build than sit in a meeting?
So actually what I started to do is I try to put all the meetings in accordance to their calendar somewhere where they already have another meeting, so they're not disturbed by other things, so they have big chunks of like building time for specific things and so forth. And I don't know, like if they hate me, they haven't told me so far, but it's kind of okay. I think as a product manager, you also have to have some technical exposure to what's going on. But, like we're humans. I don't need to talk to them about how they're building the solutions. But if we are aligned on what the problems are that we're focusing, you always have something to discuss, right? Like, hey, how was the presentation that I did last time, right? I'm also giving some feedback back to the engineers. Hey, I think my impression was that this did not work, or like you were looking like you had some trouble with this particular person. What's up with that and all that? And, it dodoesn't matter. Like engineers are people too, Daniel. So it seems to be kind of okay.
Yeah. I never said the opposite.
I just threw you
under the bus here. I know. I love it.
Yeah, I started out as an engineer myself. So no, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
I love them. They're great. They save our asses so often.
Yeah. I love my engineers too. Yeah, absolutely.
So I have a question regarding your sentence recently that you said, throw the books away.
Yeah.
It's just, generalizations mainly. I know I'm throwing you back under the bus as well. No,
that's
but
okay.
I read a lot of books, but I do understand your point that it always depends. And so, there's people coaching. I think you do that. What do you do exactly? And who would your ideal mentee be? If you have an ideal mentee, kind of what type of person?
What I'm doing in my coaching sessions, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. What I'm doing with my coaching, like with the people that I'm coaching, is that your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I started coaching others, what was quite interesting to me was to see that a lot of times these product managers are reading the right information, but they don't know how to apply it. Like they tend to always say the same books. Marty Kagan's Inspired, that kind of thing. And, like all these books that are very, very known. But they struggle deriving value from them. And sometimes you have the problem that you first need to sort of figure out in your coaching, is it you or is it the product organization? And where do you have your gaps? What's really refreshing in coaching is that because you're an external person, people are generally more open criticizing themselves for the weaknesses that they have. And that is very helpful because it puts me into a position that maybe their coworkers do not have. Like you're afraid that you give off a bad impression or like that your next review will be negatively tarnished or whatever. But like they don't have this fear when they're talking to me. Yeah. And I think in coaching, it's very important to sort of figure out, okay, why are you doing this? Where do you want to go? Like, are you just getting anxious that you're losing your job? Or is it, like, do you want to go into product leadership? Or no, I want to be the best individual contributor that I can be. Like, I want to be better at data. I want to be better at UX research. The field of product management is so diverse, and yet you see always the same sort of patterns. People love to be challenged by someone where they have no fear that it comes back to them. It's a really safe haven to just say that, yeah, I suck at this. and I need help.
Yeah.
The more senior you become in your positions, the harder it is to get that feedback. This is my impression. And oftentimes it's just that, like you listen to people and you tell them, no, it's probably not as good. Maybe you could have solved it different, or like, this is how I would have done it, or like, what do you think is the best approach to this and that? And then, as you said, like, it's not about throwing the books away, but I had it a couple of times that I was reading a book, I did not get a lot of value from it, but then I reread it after having much more experience, and then it started to become really good. And that's the problem. Giving someone just a book does not, it's an information source, but nobody's there to tell you whether you're applying it right. And the problem with a lot of books versus coaching is that there's no one on the way to sort of course correct you. You might be understanding something from a book completely the wrong way because there has no practical examples, and you just run, right? Like, I don't know, like if you have a company yourself, you know how this is. Am I a good leader? I don't know. Is my product organization product led? I don't know. I think so. Marty Kagan would say so. But having a coach come in and just like light your stuff on fire is a really good thing. And, in the end, it is about building up people, clarifying their goals, and making it manageable as well. And, in a lot of sense, it's about therapy almost. But it's really cool for both, like for myself, because it gives me insight into what other people do. And for them to actually get real value out of it and be challenged in certain things.
Definitely.
That they never have otherwise.
Yeah. And where can people book that product therapy session with you?
Well, at the moment, I'm totally overbooked. I think because I have a main job as well as a product manager. But yeah, I mean, I'm totally unprepared for this question right now. No, but like, you can ask me on LinkedIn if you really want to. Like people can just connect with me on LinkedIn. My name is Leah Tharin, so you see the name probably in the recording as well. Yes. But yeah, at the moment I'm really booked out. But like, there's a lot of great product coaches, and one of the sites that I quite like is the Mentors Club, because you can really sort and go for a specific area, like product management or engineers or whatever, and then you pick and choose and you just see. So if you never had a coach, I highly recommend to anyone to just start trying to do that. Not every experience will be great, let's be honest. Some people should not be coaches, but it helps to have someone just give you honest feedback in a relationship like this. And the Mentors Club, by the way, is free. Whereas I'm not. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I see the website. There's also what I know is Growth Mentor, where you can also probably find product people that give out free hours of advice. Leah, is there any question I haven't asked, any topic you think we should cover and haven't covered?
I have no idea. I just keep talking. I don't know. No, I think this was relatively thorough. I don't know. Like, I hope this was interesting for people who didn't have that broad of a perspective. I mean, it's basically Leah's understanding what a product manager is, and then I just presented it as, that's how you should think about it.
No, of course they will now take this. But they will take this as the Bible now and carry it forward.
Well, it is true. It's the word of Leah, of course.
And she's exactly. No, I personally think it was super interesting. Thank you for taking the time while having COVID. I really appreciate this. And this recording.
I'm holding out at the moment.
Yeah, we're getting through it. This podcast will be published on all the podcast platforms, and I'll be sharing the link online and everywhere, and with you as well, so you can share it with your network. But that's about it.
Yeah, that sounds
all my
great.
questions are answered. I know.
Thank you.
I know how to move forward. Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Everything. No, that's done. It's done.
I'll try to book a session with you once you're free and not ill anymore.
I mean, I will give you a Calendly link, and then the earliest I think that you can book is like in 4 weeks or so. But so like we find something. We'll find something.
That's fine. Cool. Amazing.
That's cool.
Thank you so much, Leah. I hope you feel better soon.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for having me. Yeah.
Well,
absolutely.
Stop recording.
Now you have to stop the recording.